Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Chambers. Hello and welcome, everyone. I hope you are safe, healthy, and happy no matter where you are. But it's time to get that favorite drink, get that blanket or that fur friend, and sit down, and we're going to talk some travel. That's right. Today we're going to be talking about the great state of New Mexico. We're going to start our trip off in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and make our way up to the gorgeous city of Santa Fe. But not to worry, we're going to get some aliens in here as we make it down to Roswell. And stay tuned to the end of the podcast because I'm going to talk about some of the spookiest towns in America, especially with Halloween coming up. You're not going to want to miss that. So starting out on our trip, we're going to start out in Albuquerque. And to me, Albuquerque seems like the most logical place to really start when you're going to New Mexico, because it's very, to me, centrally located, especially if you're going to be doing road trips or you're driving, or renting a car and doing, going somewhere. Plus it's a major city, so if you're flying from either the east, west coast, or out of town, or internationally, you're probably going to be going into Albuquerque anyway. So it's just a good launching point. And it's weird to think, when I was thinking about this week's podcast, I've been talking to a friend and we were deciding on guys trips and things like that and places that we'd like to go. And, being in Texas, we're a little bit more prone to thinking about driving over to New Mexico versus some other people where it's going to be like over 12 hours or 24 hours or however far you are. But the more he, wanted to go to New Mexico, specifically Santa Fe, and we'll get to that in another segment. But it just seemed kind of interesting. But then the more I looked into it, the more I got interested in New Mexico, because I've only driven through New Mexico and stayed in smaller towns because I had a roommate that lived in Farmington, New Mexico, which was about an hour south of Durango, and we would go and stay with his family, and very gorgeous area. I mean, New Mexico has some beautiful, beautiful landscape. It is absolutely worth checking out. And you don't even think of New Mexico as a major international, place, but with the art community and the outdoor enthusiasts, New Mexico is a really desirable location. And with almost 300 days of sunshine a year, it kind of makes it even more desirable. So right now you're thinking, that might not be so bad, right? But we talk about, like, when we go into Albuquerque, what's there to do in Albuquerque? Well, it's a major city. There's all kinds of things to do. You can do the typical city things, check out the downtown area, the zoo, the museums, things like that. But one thing, I'm going to go through a couple things that I'm going to recommend to you to check out, because when you're in New Mexico, there's a lot of different cultural things that you can experience that you can't really experience in other states or other parts of the United States. So I think this is really has some wonderful exhibits and museums that aren't typically what you would find in a major city. And I'm going to start with one which I think is kind of interesting, the Turquoise Museum. Okay, so the Turquoise Museum, it's in this really gorgeous looking castle. I mean, it's literally stated as a castle that it's in. And you get to learn all about turquoise and during the time of the American Southwest. And you visit this it's a modern, they call it a modern castle, but this modern castle exhibit. And it's really interesting. It features a vast collection of turquoise jewelry and other pieces, such as antique furniture. And you also have a self-guided tour with your admission ticket. You can also upgrade your ticket to a Turquoise 101 class. So if you are a turquoise lover and you have lots of that jewelry or ever wanted, they have gift shops and you can see the beautiful handcrafted jewelry. This might be somewhere to check out. Every city and country is known in certain parts for, cultural things or stones or food or something. I know Australia, the opal is very big down there. If you go to Tahiti, it's the black pearls. If you go to New Mexico in the Southwest region, you're going to be introduced to a lot more turquoise. So it's really kind of neat. So you should put this on your list. The Turquoise Museum, definitely worth checking out. Now, some other things that you can check out if you want to expand your cultural horizon is the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. And this offers visitors like a really unique chance to discover more about the Pueblo Indian culture, which, to be honest, I don't know much about as well. So this would be something that I would definitely want to put on my list. The center features a collection of pottery and art, as well as having many hands-on activities. So if you're traveling with someone like a kiddo or someone like a large child like myself who likes to touch everything, this is a really good thing to do. You can sit back and you watch traditional Native American dances. There's a gift shop where they sell original artwork, and you can even have a chance to take your own little pottery making class there. So I don't know how that would turn out for me. I would love to try that. To me, that sounds really great. But this is definitely something to do. It adds that extra bit of culture, but you also have a very interactive experience. So check out the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center on your trip when going through Albuquerque. Yes, you're not going to want to miss it. Now, the other one, this is kind of a big one. There's a couple of these that are pretty obvious, but I had to put this one on there. The Sandia Peak Tramway. That is something that if you're afraid of heights, this is definitely not going to be for you. If you have any fears of things like that, I'm definitely going to not recommend this to you. But the Sandia Peak Tramway runs from the northeast edge of Albuquerque to the crest line of the Sandia Mountains. The tramway is the longest aerial tram in the U.S. That's right. And it only moves at 12 miles per hour. So it's not like racing up the mountain. So, if you have any fears of going super fast in a tram, that's not going to be happening. But it does move at a nice pace. But again, if you are not good with heights, this is definitely not something to put on your list. It takes only about 15 minutes to get from one end to the other. So you're not talking about a lot of time. And you get to a view from the highest point, which is just absolutely gorgeous scenery. You can see all the city as well as 11,000 square miles of New Mexico. So it's really got some wonderful panoramic views that you can see from the top of there. And when you arrive up there, you can also eat at the High Finance Restaurant or just go hiking in the mountains because you've now come up to 11,000 feet. So you got to at least get up to the mountain and do some hiking, which is really great because if you think about it, a lot of people that make it up to 11,000 feet are going to be taking all day just to do that hike to get up and down. So this kind of gives you a jump start where you don't have to make it quite as long or strenuous as a day. But also be aware when you are hiking at higher elevations and you're not used to that, you're going to be a little bit more shortened. You're going to have your breath is going to be affected by that. So make sure if you are not someone who hikes regularly, that you pack water, you take your time, and just be aware that the air is a little thinner up there. So definitely check that out, the Sandia Peak Tramway. Really, really gorgeous view. Highly recommended. Okay, now this one, I threw it in there only because, I know that when people listen to a podcast that we have, no one's the same. Everyone has their own taste. This is not one of my tastes because I have even being from Texas, I have a small fear of rattlesnakes. But the American International Rattlesnake Museum is in Albuquerque. So if that perked your interest right away, you're just going, oh, a rattlesnake museum. Awesome. And it's not just a rattlesnake museum when you think of like it's, taxidermy or, it's history of rattlesnakes and stuff. No, this museum is the largest collection of live rattlesnakes. So if you are interested to learn more about rattlesnakes, different species, everything you can think of, the species come from the South, the North, and Central America. They have recreated habitats that are as natural as they can make them. You're going to learn myths about rattlesnakes as well as, possibly curing a phobia or heightening your phobia if you already have one. That's right. It's a great day out. They have a gift shop with all sorts of snake memorabilia. So if you have, Halloween coming up, if you make a trip to New Mexico and go to the Rattlesnake Museum, you may find something that you can use in your Halloween decorations if you want. Or if you're just a big snake fan or you just love, rattlesnakes and things like that, this is a stop for you. It's educational as well, to me, a little bit fearful again, but everything's controlled. You're not actually going to be up and close and personal with the snakes. It's well maintained, but it's something that if you have that phobia, this again might not be a spot for you, but very, very interesting. I thought it would be one to put on the list. The last one I'm going to throw out there when you go to Albuquerque that I think is, to me, almost a must-do. When you think of pictures of Albuquerque, right away you think of the hot air balloons over the Southwest and just floating. And exactly, that's what it is, the hot air balloon ride. So Rainbow Riders is who I would recommend you look into. They've been offering hot air balloon rides over Albuquerque and the surrounding states. So not just Albuquerque, but, the surrounding states as well for a very long time. They are an established TripAdvisor Hall of Fame member. And if you guys don't know what a TripAdvisor Hall of Fame member is, that just means that you are in pretty good hands. They know what they're doing. So that's a very high recommendation right there. You choose from various choices of rides, including a sunrise hot air balloon or a sunset hot air balloon ride, or just, if you want a private one on your own, you can do that. The most popular ride, though, that is sought after is the Dawn Patrol flight. That takes off 30 minutes before sunrise, which gives you basically the perfect platform to watch the city as the sun comes up. And I can't even put into words how gorgeous the photos that you can get are from that. Again, if you are not a heights person, this is obviously not going to be something for you. Maybe you just send somebody up with your camera or the GoPro or something, and they can take some shots for you. But, even I guess if you are okay with heights, but you're not quite sure of hot air balloons in general, I would really recommend checking them out and giving this a try, because I promise you the risk is going to be worth the reward when you see that view, especially if you go at sunset or sunrise. So right away, those are going to be definitely places and things to do that I'm recommending. So the Rainbow Riders, so check them out. Now, again, Albuquerque is a very large city, so there's lots of places to stay. I'm not going to get into the food. There's so many. You have to really do your research when it comes to where you want to eat as far as, style. A lot of, Mexican cuisine and Southwest foods and barbecues and things like that. So it's really whatever's going to cleanse your palate. And again, if anyone that has listened to my podcast before, I am definitely a foodie, and I will barbecue for sure and Mexican food for sure. Like, I don't know, whatever you put in front of me, I'm going to be trying out. So do your research, check out what is good for you. There's plenty of options. You're not going to run out. As far as hotels go, it's really kind of the same thing with hotels. And a lot of people say, oh, well, where should I stay? And, going through it and researching and looking, I found a lot of the same places that you can stay, budget-friendly places, Hiltons, extended stays, things like that. You can stay at the Sheraton, Albuquerque Uptown. That's not a bad option. And that runs you about $107. If you want to stay in Old Town, a little bit little higher price, the Hotel Albuquerque at Old Town, and you can typically find rooms between $150 and $200 a night, depending when you're traveling. But one that I am going to really recommend is the Hotel Chaco. That's right, the Hotel Chaco. Really great deal for what you can get. TripAdvisor made this their travelers of choice for. I won an award for accommodations and for this year, 2020, which is crazy because of what's going on in 2020. But you're going to be about anywhere roughly around $200 a night. But it's going to have all the amenities that you could possibly want, restaurant in it. If you're, a pool, it's going to have, a bar, patio areas, workout sections, things like that. It's going to have gorgeous views, places to hang out. So it's really a great option if you don't mind spending a little bit extra. But I think that like at $200 a night, that's relatively reasonable to me. So I'm okay with that. I mean, like I said, the other options you can definitely go down from there. Depending what your budget is, what your style is. I mean, it's a city, so they have the Hampton Inn, Holiday Inn Express, things like that. So you're not gonna be short on where to stay. But if I was recommending a place, I'd recommend Hotel Chaco as my choice going to Albuquerque. All right, so there you go. Those are the recommendations, what to check out as we start our trip in New Mexico. But coming up after the break, we are going to travel about an hour or so northeast, a little bit northeast, to the city of Santa Fe. You are not going to want to miss it.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. We just finished talking about traveling into Albuquerque, New Mexico. And make sure you guys stay tuned to the end of the podcast because I'm going to give you some of the spookiest towns that you might be able to visit this October for Halloween. But as we move on, we're going into Santa Fe. That's right, Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's about an hour or so from Albuquerque, so you're not talking about a really far jump. So you even can do Santa Fe as a day trip if you really wanted to. So if you were staying in Albuquerque and wanted to go back and forth a little bit, it's a little bit more driving than I would personally want to do, but it's definitely doable. So you can drive up for the day, maybe early, spend an entire day up there, and then come back. But this is the problem. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, when you get to Santa Fe, you are just going to find so much that you want to do and so many things that you just have to experience that you are not going to want to leave. You're going to want to stay. And that's why it is absolutely worth it to start your trip in Albuquerque and then get up to Santa Fe and stay for a little while. I mean, a weekend, I don't even think a weekend would do it. I think you could stay in Santa Fe for probably about anywhere between 5 to 8 days, and I wouldn't think that would be too long. There's just so much to do, and especially depending the time of year you go. Again, we're not having to worry with, necessarily lots of rainfall. You're getting about 300 days of sun throughout the year, but you are going to get 4 seasons. That's one thing that people don't really think about, but you will get 4 seasons up there. So if you're not a fan of the cold, maybe going during the winter months would not be your ideal choice. but I would highly recommend going in the fall. That is probably one of the best times to go. You're going to go in that August, September, or even October range is going to be what I would highly recommend to do for some of the best weather that you're going to get. Now, a lot of people, when you say, oh, Santa Fe, they immediately jump out and say, oh, art, which is absolutely true, and we'll talk about some of that. But there's a couple of things that that people don't know about Santa Fe. And one thing that I found out, which I didn't even know this, that Santa Fe was established in 1607. It became a capital 3 years later, and why is that important? Because that makes it the oldest capital city in the country and the oldest European settlement west of the Mississippi. So, yeah, that's pretty impressive. There are still buildings from that era, the Spanish era, that still stand. So there's lots of history, a lot of history if you think back to 1607. So it's really great. I mean, the Palace of Governors has stood since the 1600s, okay? It's a historical adobe structure, and it serves New Mexico as the History Museum. So, I mean, their History Museum alone is like some 400 years old, right? So it's just incredible. It's really incredible. I didn't even know that. Some other places that when you get to Santa Fe, we'll talk about accommodations and food and things like that. But let's jump into things to do, because right away we go places and we travel to these places because we want to experience what that city or town or destination has to offer, right? We want something that we can't get from home, or something that just fills us with joy, or it lets us in, or opens and brings more into our life, right? I mean, to me, that's the point of traveling, to expand our horizon, to allow ourselves to grow as a person. And we do that by experiencing new cultures, new people, new foods, new experiences. You know, it's just all of that in a melting pot. And to be honest, that's kind of what Santa Fe is. It's this massive melting pot of gorgeous, history and culture and art, and it all kind of comes together. So a place that you're going to want to check out, the oldest church is called San Miguel Chapel. It is the oldest church in the country, or people apparently say the oldest church. I mean, this dates back to early 1600s, and it is still standing. That's right. It is also a church that holds services. They have services twice a day and once in Latin. So that is kind of impressive. You know, I grew up at least in high school, I was at a private school, and we had to learn Latin at one semester as a freshman, and I remember very little of it. It wasn't a language to me that was interesting, but it helped a lot with vocabulary. So if anybody's up on their Latin, or any of those scholars that speak Latin, hey, there is a service at the oldest church in the country for you. So check that out. Another thing about Santa Fe, like we mentioned earlier, the cultural melting pot, is it's connected to 23 Native American tribes, nations, and pueblos who reside in New Mexico. So that is a large portion of our country that, unfortunately, I don't think we really understand or know much about. So not only can you visit somewhere in Albuquerque, the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center that we talked about earlier in Albuquerque, you can also go up and just be connected with so many and learn so many different things about the Native American tribes and the Pueblos. So it's something that you want to look at, and definitely make sure that you find time to experience. And again, I don't recommend doing a day trip on this. A minimum of a weekend, but I would probably say you're going to want to stay at least 5 days. I think I said 5 to 8 days, but I mean, 5 days is probably really great. 8 days would just give you a chance to experience everything. If you're one of those people that loves celebrations and festivals and things like that, then January is going to be a month that you're going to want to consider going to Santa Fe. They have King's Day celebration, if I pronounce this correctly, Saint Ildefonso Feast Day and St. Paul's Feast Day. Those are all in January. If you are going more in July, August, there are some festivals. There's going on is the anniversary of the 1680 Pueblo Revolt and the Santa Clara Feast Day. So there's plenty of different celebrations. Those are just some big ones that you might want to take note of if that's kind of your jam. But have no fear. Like I said earlier, you get 300 days of sunshine and all 4 seasons, so you could really plan a trip at any time throughout the year to go to Santa Fe. And it's not just about the cultural aspect, too, or the art, which, again, I know we're going to get into. But there are places to bike, you can camp, there's golf. Again, because there's different seasons, they get snow, so you can go skiing. So there's, again, something for everyone in Santa Fe. Okay, so I know that everyone always says art is the biggest thing and biggest draw to a lot of people that go to Santa Fe, and it can be. And 1 in 10 jobs in Santa Fe are connected to the arts. The city has a vast creative scene, and this spans throughout all areas. Now, if you like to meet local artists, you're going to want to visit Santa Fe on a Friday night. If you're doing that weekend or that day trip or whatever, that's when many of the galleries, especially in the summer, hold public openings. A lot of the galleries are next door to each other, so it's really an ideal place to begin exploring the city's art scene. So if you're not really into the art scene, or and you want to get immersed in it, that's a good way to start. If you're already a huge art lover, it's not a bad way to kick off your stay in Santa Fe by doing that. So Friday night, definitely one to check out when you're there. If you're looking for more contemporary art, you can head to the Rail Yard District. You're going to find a lot more contemporary art. But as far as art goes, there's so much there. It's always fitting to see the O'Keeffe's work. The George O'Keeffe Museum. It's located downtown. It features not only her paintings, but exhibits on her creative process as well. So if you have a car and a little bit of extra time, you can venture north to Ghost Ranch, and that's one of O'Keeffe's first homes. So if you're a big Georgia O'Keeffe fan, then this is going to be something you're going to want to check out. That's really something that everyone always talks about doing when they go, so you should really definitely put it on your list. But I'm also going to tell you to put this on your list, and I'm going to give you 2 words. All right, are you ready for these 2 words? Meow Wolf. That's right. I didn't stutter. Meow Wolf. Okay, this place is unbelievable. If you love art, if you love interacting, if you love imagination, if you love an experience, this is going to be something you want to do. The Meow Wolf House was started by a group of pop-up artists, and they came together wanting to do something very extraordinary. And so they pitched this idea that they had to create this house, this artistic idea, to a local resident. And you'll never know who this local resident was. Or maybe some of you do. But I'm going to tell you. It's George R.R. Martin. And if you don't know who George R.R. Martin is, he's the author of Game of Thrones. That's right. He basically became their backer and their landlord. They bought out an old bowling alley of some kind, something like that, and they built it into this experience and this place. And that's really what it is. It's an artistic experience. And you go through this house, and each participant or each visitor chooses their own path through this really, really interesting and extraordinary exhibit. You walk through, and you climb through, and you crawl through. I mean, it's imaginative and immersive of all different kinds of environments. I mean, you can touch almost everything in the house. Things light up. There's sounds that are made. You can open a refrigerator and walk through, and all of a sudden you're in a cave with, mastodon ribs where you can play them, like a xylophone, and there's different lights and sounds, and it's really, really interesting. And I highly, highly recommend it. It's appropriate for people of all ages, so it doesn't really matter. So imagine jumping into what Dr. Seuss's head might have looked like, and you might have an idea of what Meow Wolf is. You can go and you can check them out on their website, and for tickets and that information before you go to make sure that they're open in the hours. It's also, most of the exhibit is ADA accessible, so if that becomes an issue, that just kind of know most of the exhibit is. But again, something good for all ages. And when you see pictures of this place, I guarantee you're just going to want to go. You're just, and it's one of those that I think when you go there, you go, oh, I could take so many pictures and it'd just be kind of cool. Yes, it would be, and you're going to get some great photos. But I imagine the experience, because it's on my list, and I imagine going into this house and being so immersed in what's around me and where I'm going and the storylines that are happening and things that I'm doing, and just kind of going through this whole thing that I'm not even going to think about pulling out a camera to take pictures. Just, I'm going to be so involved. And it is a work of art and an artistic experience like no other. So you definitely want to keep that on your list. Okay, so places to stay. Okay, places to stay. I was kind of, I looked at so many, and Santa Fe, they have everything from a Four Seasons to the Hilton or the Homewood Suites and things like that. And I'm going to throw out one that I found that I think is really fantastic: the Hacienda Nicholas Bed and Breakfast. So one, I'm a big fan of bed and breakfasts anyway. But what makes this one really neat? It's gorgeous. It's very typical Adobe New Mexico style. It was built in the 1920s as a private home. It's a very chic Adobe B&B. It's also 4 blocks walking from the Santa Fe Plaza, and a 5-block walk from the Loretto Chapel. Rooms in the main house and suites. There's rooms in the main house and suites in a separate building, and they're decorated again like a New Mexico or New Mexican art style and furnishings, things like that. It's got all the things that you want for fine bedding and linens, and it's just a really fantastic place. It comes with coffee maker. They have Wi-Fi. Breakfast is included. There's also a free evening reception with wine and appetizers, and a spa specializing in Asian treatments. So, now, a lot of you don't really get a spa with a bed and breakfast, because bed and breakfasts are fantastic, but then, a lot of times you go to these other bigger places because you want the other amenities. But this has that amenity. And guess what, guys? It's only going to run you about $150 a night, which to me is fantastic and completely doable. Now, if you're wanting to do something else, the El Dorado Hotel and Spa, it's a little less than that. That runs about $123 a night, and it's a little bit bigger, a little bit more, what I say, mainstream, not a bed and breakfast. Again, doesn't have all that some of those touches that you might find at a bed and breakfast, but it definitely is a very nice place to stay. But do your research. Those are the ones that I recommend. The Hacienda Nicholas Bed and Breakfast, definitely one that you should check out. No doubt. I'm going to put that out there right away. As far as somewhere to eat, again, there are so many wonderful places in Santa Fe that I don't even know where to start with you guys. But there is one that I found that I think you will all absolutely love, and it is the Jumbo Cafe. That's right, the Jumbo Cafe. It's an infusion of Swahili, Indian, Arabic, and European influences. Looking at the food, it's even just pictures is going to make your mouth water. It really will. The chef has won multiple awards. It's just fantastic. So that's going to be, it was reported that one of the best places to eat in 2020. And looking at the menu, I'm definitely going to agree with them. It's very affordable. Most of everything on the menu runs anything, I think, between $10 to $15. Sides are anywhere between $4 to $6. You can get the mango ginger lemonade, which sounds delicious, or the Jamaican hibiscus cooler. Ooh, that sounds great too. They have everything on there from spice rubbed salmon to jerk chicken, Moroccan spiced beef brisket, spiced leg of lamb, coconut chicken curry, curried lentils, combo plates, Kenyan style beef kebabs. I mean, it's great, and you're gonna have a lot of flavors, a lot of things that your mouth is gonna explode with just a cultural infusion there. So definitely check that one out. That is not to be missed. So there you go. There are some recommendations. And again, that's just scratching the surface. There's so much to do in Santa Fe. Definitely do some research, check into some things. We could probably spend an entire day talking about everything and everywhere to go and what to do. So make sure that you check out other options. Okay, when we come back, coming up after this break, we are going to go a little bit farther south, take a little bit longer trip, where we're going to go and search of some aliens in Roswell, New Mexico.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. We were just discussing the wonderful, gorgeous, and cultural city of Santa Fe. That's right. Again, definitely put it on your list to make it to Santa Fe if you haven't. It just always reminds me of Brian Larson's Rent when I say we're going to go to Santa Fe. So anyway, Santa Fe, gorgeous, gorgeous city, lots to do. And make sure you stick with us to the end, because I'm going to go through some of the spookiest towns you may want to visit here in the U.S. But speaking of spooky, we're getting into all that talk of aliens. That's right, we're going to go about 3 hours south from Santa Fe to Roswell, New Mexico. So Roswell is, no matter where you're going, whether you're coming from Albuquerque to go down there or going up to Santa Fe and going down there, it's roughly, give or take, about 3 hours, a little over 3 hours drive from either place. Albuquerque is a little farther west, Santa Fe is just a little bit farther north. So you're going to be driving about the same amount of time, anywhere between 3 to 3.5 hours to go to Roswell. And a lot of people, reading up about Roswell, you think of, Area 51, the aliens and everything like that. And you think, well, what else could be in this town? And there's got to be something else there. And a lot of people say that it's not really worth it. And after researching and going through and looking what the town has to offer, as far as visiting from out of town, I don't necessarily recommend Roswell as a weekend getaway. So if you're in Albuquerque and decide you want to make, a 3-hour drive to Roswell, that's kind of I don't know. To me, I don't necessarily think that might be worth it. So we're gonna talk about Roswell, but then we're also gonna talk about somewhere else to kind of travel outside of Roswell. So a lot of places that you can, because there's a lot of other places that are closer. So, you can kind of base in Roswell and then make your day trips out, which I think I would recommend doing, versus just going to Roswell and staying there. Ruidoso is not very far, especially if you're driving, from Texas and places like that. But let's talk about Roswell. And everyone thinks of aliens. All right. And according to History.com, this is the story of Roswell. In the summer of 1947, a rancher discovered an unidentifiable debris in his sheep pasture outside of Roswell, New Mexico. Officials from the local Air Force base asserted that it was a crashed weather balloon. Many people believed it was the remains of an extraterrestrial flying saucer, a series of secret dummy drops in New Mexico during the 1950s. So nearly 50 years later, the story of the mysterious debris broke. The U.S. military issued a report linking an incident to a top-secret atomic espionage project called Project Mongol. Still many people today they embrace the UFO theory, and a lot of people are always curious. And a lot of people visit Roswell and the crash site every year. Okay, so that was according to History.com. Now, a lot of people said, well, you heard me say dummy drops. What is a dummy drop? Well, a dummy drop is basically an experiment. It's meant to test the ways that pilots survive falls from high altitudes. So they would send these bandaged, dummies, that looked, latex skin, aluminum bones. They try to make these dummies that were pilots, and they would drop them from high altitudes to test survival falls and things like that. So that's what they believed what they were seeing was happening. And you can really, I'm not here to tell you that aliens don't exist or do exist. Everyone has their own belief. I think it's kind of cool. I think it's really neat. Whether I believe that it's aliens or not, I do believe in that spiritual kind of essence that maybe that is there. So I do kind of believe in that. But as far as aliens go, I don't know if I'm quite at the aliens mark. But it's definitely kind of what Roswell is really known for. And so I started looking into things to do, and definitely the International UFO Museum and Research Center, which is located in Roswell. It's in the downtown district, and it focuses largely on the 1947 Roswell crash and then the later supposed UFO incidents in the United States and elsewhere. So it's kind of become a little hub, for UFO and alien things and research, things like that. So if that's your jam, hey, check it out. It's supposed to be really neat. I definitely would go check it out. If I'm going through New Mexico, I'm going to be stopping at the UFO Museum, definitely. There's lots of cool pictures, too, that you can take at the museum as well. Another thing, because there's more than just the the UFO Museum, the Anderson Museum of Contemporary Art is there, and it features a wide range of collections of modern art. The Roswell Museum and Art Center is also there, and it's collection of paintings. It has a collection of paintings by Peter Hurd, Henrietta Wyeth, Georgia O'Keeffe, so lots of great artists. So you don't have to just go to Albuquerque or Santa Fe to see some amazing art. You can find it in other areas. There's also the Area 51 Museum at the Alien Zone Cafe, which has a cafe and gift shop. So if you're really big into conspiracy theories and things like that, it's something you're going to want to definitely check out. Now, as far as where to stay in town, I sat here kind of looking and doing some research, and to be honest, there wasn't a lot of places, and this is why I don't really recommend going to Roswell to as far as more than like maybe one night, right? Because most of the places to stay in Roswell are going to be Motel 6, type of places like that. If you don't mind doing that, not a problem. Best Westerns, things like that. That's going to be kind of what you're going to be looking at as far as places in Roswell to stay. It's okay if you're wanting to do some things, but everything that I've researched and read says that everything you're going to do in Roswell or want to do is going to be done in about a day. So if you drive that 3 hours, one, I don't know if it's even worth it to make that 3 hour trip for some of you, or even the 3-hour trip from Albuquerque. But you can always go to Ruidoso, which is kind of a lovely little town, capital. Or I recommend doing this, especially if you're like me who likes a lot of history, okay? And you just don't want to go to a planetarium or an aviation museum or something like that. You can take a 1-hour trip out to Lincoln, New Mexico. That's right. Lincoln, New Mexico. A lot of you guys are thinking, what is Lincoln known for? Well, I'll tell you what. Lincoln, New Mexico is known for the famous stories of Billy the Kid and the Regulators. So it was also the spot of the Lincoln County Wars that started the Old West legends. So definitely a lot of cool history there. It's only about an hour drive from Roswell, so you can do actually both. So regardless of whether you're staying in Roswell or you going to stay somewhere outside of Lincoln, it's recommended to stay at Captain, or driving back over to Ruidoso, or you can stay in Roswell. I mean, that's fine if you like that whole alien vibe. But I don't recommend doing it for more than a night. But if you take that day trip to Lincoln, New Mexico, you can go into the town. The town really is a museum itself, and it's kind of a ghost town, which is really kind of neat, especially if you like all those tales and old Western type of stories. And if you're traveling to Texas or going to the White Sands or Carlsbad Cavern, this is definitely one to put on your list because it is a very easy trip to make and stop. Okay? And just so you guys know, a lot of people think this, Billy the Kid is not buried there. Okay? It's actually a big... I found out, traveling with my roommate when we were going across New Mexico, that I believe it was Fort Sumner that he was buried at, but I could be wrong. It's kind of a conspiracy theory as to where he's actually buried. It was said that Billy the Kid was buried somewhere and then moved. So anyway, you might have to do your research on that one. I'm not 100% sure, but I was told it was Fort Sumner, and there's a little gravestone out there. But it could be somewhere else. But anyway, Billy the Kid stories never bore me. It's really great. It only has a small B&B in Lincoln, so you can find motels, like I said, in Captain. You can visit Smokey the Bear Museum while you're there as well. And again, you can always go to Ruidoso. So this is kind of what I would recommend. So if you're going to do Roswell, I'd recommend a Lincoln Roswell trip to make it worth your time, and that way you can stay and kind of make it part of the road trip and then continue on and either head back up to either Albuquerque or go back to Santa Fe, because there's nothing wrong with going back to Santa Fe. Now there's some good restaurants that you can eat at with some cultural flair to it. I guess New Mexico kick to it. And one of those restaurants that I found that I would check out would be the Cowboy Cafe or the Cattle Baron. So the Cowboy Cafe is going to be a little bit more rugged, diner-esque style with that cowboy, Western type of vibe. But if you want somewhere, with a little bit more, can fit a bigger party, sit down a little bit more, it's kind of the steakhouse a little bit style, you're going to want to check out the Cattle Baron. And again, you're not going to break the bank on any of these restaurants or any of these places that you're going to want to stay. Even for being somewhat touristy for some of these places, you're still going to find a very affordable place to stay. You're looking anywhere between, $40 to $100 a night, which, if you're getting a room between two people, if you're traveling with somebody else, or even for a couple, that's not a big deal these days. You can always do the camping thing too. There's a lot of RV parks around the area, so that's another thing. If you're traveling by RV and you drive down, there's plenty of places you can stay in your comfort of your own RV at one of the sites and experience everything at that point, which might be even the best option if you think about it. So there you go. So Roswell, New Mexico, a lot of interesting things, definitely that whole alien vibe and the crash site that you can go and check out. Would I put it on my absolute to-do list? No, but if I had the time, I definitely would recommend at least checking it out, but doing more of like a passing through trip versus going out of your way specifically. So if you made the drive to Santa Fe from Texas or somewhere else and you have to head back south, I really recommend throwing it in there. It's got some kind of neat aspects to it that you might enjoy. So there you go. All right. So trips to New Mexico is seeming a little bit more worth it now. I know you're sitting there going, I need to start planning this trip, right? Well, good. You should get on that. But stay with me because when we come back, we're going to go through and talk about some of the spookiest towns in America that you can visit.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. We were just discussing a little trip into the unknown where there might have been, may or may not have been, some UFOs or extraterrestrial life in the town of Roswell, New Mexico, as well as a little side trip to Lincoln, New Mexico. So things to very much look into if you're interested in that. But thanks for sticking with me because as promised, I'm going to go through some of the spookiest towns or places that you can visit in the U.S. Now, this is just a small sample size, so I'm sure there's others out there, and I'd love to find out or hear from you about them. But these are just a couple that I have found, and again, you're going to see some kind of a theme with some of these, but I like the ghost story aspect and just the kind of the creepiness of stuff, but sometimes there are a few of these that would even push my limits as far as that. I don't necessarily believe in the paranormal activity, but again, there are things that you just can't explain, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So the first place I'm gonna throw out there is Yuma Territorial Prison. That's right. The Yuma Territorial Prison, it held more than 3,000 murderers, thieves, and like any other criminals in 33 years of operation. It was open from 1876 to 1909. They say more than 100 of whom died at the prison. So that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. Out of 3,000 and, at least 100 who died there. Guides have reported feeling a chill near cell number 14. So if you go to the Yuma Territorial Prison, which is in Arizona, by the way, if you go to the prison, cell number 14 prisoner's name was John Ryan, who committed suicide. Another unsettling spot in the prison is also called the Dark Cell, where disruptive inmates were held in isolation. It's said that no one died there, but 2 inmates that were transferred to the Dark Cell were transferred to an insane asylum shortly after being released. So I don't know what that does for you, but, in Arizona, if you're there, the Yuma Territorial Prison, it's kind of a spooky place. So if that's your jam, you should check that place out. Okay, another place that is kind of spooky, and again, we're kind of in this theme of October with Halloween coming up. If you have the chance to go up to Alaska, check out the Red Onion Saloon. Okay, it was established in 1898. That's pretty old. The Red Onion Saloon is in Skagway, Alaska, and was a popular brothel during the Klondike Gold Rush. Today it's said to be haunted by one of the women who worked there. And the woman that they believe haunts it is known as Lydia. The resident ghost has reportedly been spotted running down a hall into a room once occupied by the madam. So right away, there you go. That's kind of a little spooky right there. So the Red Onion Saloon, they offer ghosts and good time girls walking tours. So if you want to experience that and you're up in Alaska, hey, check that out. Sounds very bone-chilling. There you go. Okay, the next place, which is a little bit different type of spooky, but it's in St. Elmo, Colorado. So St. Elmo, Colorado, it was formerly named Forest City. St. Elmo was a mining center with a population of around 2,000 when it was at its peak. By 1930, though, 7 people reportedly resided there, including the family who ran the general store and the hotel. So it's rumored one of the hotel rooms is rumored to be haunted to this day. It's now privately owned and it's maintained, but it's kind of cool because when you go, it's a very takes you back type of city. So it's you're really going to feel like you're in a mining town. You're like stepping back in time with it. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, go to St. Elmo, Colorado, and check it out. Okay, another place is we're going to go over to the East Coast. We're going to go to Delaware. Fort Delaware. That's right. It's set on Pea Patch Island, which I always find interesting to say. Pea Patch Island. So for any of us doing podcasts, there's some plosive practice for you. Pea Patch Island. But Fort Delaware served as a Union prison camp during the Civil War, housing as many as 12,000 or more Confederate prisoners of war at one time. And this was like a modern-day concentration camp, it sounded like, in some senses. It was really kind of bad to hear the conditions that were reported there. You know, inmates had no beds or water to wash with, and they were forced to sleep on cold stone floors with vermin and all kinds of things. The fort was abandoned in 1944 and became a state park in 1951, but its dark history has made it a very popular spot for paranormal enthusiasts specifically. They have dungeons where prisoners were held. Apparently each October, Diamond State ghost investigators host a paranormal hunt through the fort. So there you go, kind of an eerie historical site to go check out, this really terrible prison. But if you're looking for kind of a spooky thing to do, you can go check out Fort Delaware. Okay, I only have a couple more, but let's move right along here. Make sure I say this one correctly. Cahaba, Alabama. It's southwest of Selma. Okay, it's apparently one of Alabama's most famous ghost town. That some would say. It was the state's first permanent capital from 1820 to 1825. It was a bustling center for trading, transport of cotton before the Civil War, and a village for freed slaves after the war. Unfortunately, all of the town residents were gone by around 1900, so now it's known as Old Cahaba Archaeological Park. The town is abandoned, and the streets and cemeteries and ruins, they've all been a setting for many ghost stories, including one about a ghostly orb appearing in a now-vanished garden maze at the home of C.C. Pegas. So there you go. That is apparently Alabama's most famous ghost town. So check it out, the Cahaba in Alabama. Okay. My next one, we're going to go up a little bit more north, okay, to Indiana. The Story Inn in Indiana. Built in 1851, the Story Inn is the only structure still standing from the small mining town of Story. So it's the only thing. And that happened, and it kind of crashed and fell apart during the Great Depression. It was restored in the 1960s, and now the inn serves as a little bed and breakfast with a resident ghost. So for years, visitors have documented that there are ghostly encounters in the inn's guest book. They named, namely with the Blue Lady is what it's been said to have been. Dr. George Story's wife is who that is believed to be, the Blue Lady. And she's said to appear if you turn a blue light on in one of the rooms above the restaurant. And if you smell cherry tobacco, which is her favorite, she's already come and gone. So there you go. Right there, I think that's what got me to say no to that one. So if I was going up there and you say, oh, you smell certain things, because I tend to smell things a lot more. So right away, I was kind of like, the Blue Lady, no thank you. So there you go. That one's in Story, Indiana. So if you are in search of an adventure for that. Okay, I got two more, and they're actually two pretty big ones. And so I think most of you guys have heard of this, but both of these kind of creep me out, but I would totally go to these and check these places out. The first place we're going to go to is up in Maine. We're going to go to Bangor, Maine, and we're going to stop at the Mount Hope Cemetery. It's one of the nation's oldest cemeteries, Mount Hope, okay? And many of you might recognize the name of this cemetery because it is familiar to most fans who watch Pet Sematary. It was adapted from Stephen King's 1983 horror novel, okay? Stephen King himself made a cameo in the scene that was filmed at the cemetery, in which he played a minister presiding over a funeral. And this is where it started to get a little creepy for me. There are actual gravestones in the cemetery that were inspired by some of the characters in Stephen King's novels. Some of his most famous characters, like Carrie from his 1974 novel, or Georgie from 1986's It. So you can actually see those names, those cemetery gravestones, tombstones, in Mount Hope that Stephen King took his inspiration from. And that's really what got me right there. So a lot of people go up there to Bangor and they stop in, but it's kind of a neat place. It's really beautiful with the tombstones and everything. So again, one of the oldest cemeteries in our nation. So check it out. And if you love Stephen King, even better, it's a bonus for you. Okay. My top spot, creepiest place, or spookiest, I should say, Salem, Massachusetts. That's right. Salem, Massachusetts, of course, we all know in history from the Salem witch trials. So you can go to the town of Salem, and especially around this time, there's a lot of activity and things that will probably be going on, a lot of things. And you can do a Salem witch walk on one of their tours, where you're greeted by a real witch, and these are people that are considered witches that are, practicing even modern day type of witches, and you can participate in a real magical circle. They'll have candle magic, performing a candle magic spell with candles made by a real witch at Crowhaven Corner, and a stone spell to be blessed with a wish. The witch will perform a blessing, and then you'll go and you can do the ghost tours, and you can go and see the cemeteries, and there's a memorial in honor of the victims of the 1692, the victims from the trials, from the Salem witch trials. And so it's just overall just that sense that happened, and they're still kind of celebrating, I think, is great, but it adds that spooky kind of creepy feel to me. And it's just, when you think of that, it's just, it's like I'm interested, but I don't know. But there you go, guys. So if you are interested in any of those, or you are kind of into that paranormal activity, or like the odd place to visit, you should check out some of those. There's so many more out there, but these are just some of the ones that I found to be the most compelling to me. I hope you have been inspired to take a trip this year, or look to start planning one. It's never too late to start traveling. It can open our eyes to new experiences, even unlock things about ourselves that we never knew. I believe everyone should travel and explore more of what this world has to offer. It can give us an appreciation and love for so many things. So let's start traveling.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.